Today, we're going to make some hot coffee cocktails. And I know we've probably both been following themes of quite cold coffee cocktails and cocktails throughout the summer. Today, we're going to be making some hot coffee cocktails. 3 we're going to be making today. The first of which is a coffee toddy. So based around the classic hot toddy cocktail. One of my favourites when I'm feeling down, feeling a bit under the weather, or even if it's just a cool night. The second of which is hot buttered coffee. So again, a spin on a classic, which is hot buttered rum. So a lot of people have been talking about bulletproof coffee by incorporating some kind of fat into the coffee. And although it has mixed responses, I think this is a really nice way to do it. And then finally, I'm going to be showing you how to make a boozy orange mocha at home. So there'll be no espresso machine, no capsule machine, no milk steaming equipment. It will all be done manually. So you can apply these techniques to making coffee at home if you want that kind of flat white latte kind of experience at home without the equipment. So, hope everyone's doing well. We're going to get straight into it and start with the coffee toddy. So, the coffee toddy I really enjoy as a combination between 2 of my favourite things, so coffee and a hot toddy. It incorporates really nice whiskey, you can play around with this, and then we've got kind of the lemon and honey as well, which bring that kind of warm, roasty, toasty, comforting feeling as well. So, I'm going to be starting by brewing the coffee, which will actually be for my first 2 drinks. But before I do that, I'm going to turn on the sous vide. And what we have here, this is a really good tool for making hot drinks whatsoever. So a sous vide machine is essentially a water bath. So you can see the temperature will start going up and it will actually keep the water at a consistent temperature. And by doing this, we're able to pre-batch cocktails, drinks, obviously food as well, which is what it's probably originally designed for, and keep them at a stable temperature. So when I do coffee competitions, I've always tried to use a sous vide circulator for any of my hot drinks because I think they're really valuable in ensuring the drinks you serve are at the perfect temperature, not too hot, not too cold, consistently and in a really efficient way. So they're actually not as expensive as you might think. I think I got mine for about £130. There's lots of different ones on the market, so check them out. But if you don't have this, don't worry. What you can do is fill up, like I've done here, like a cool box, or some kind of Tupperware tub or a pan, whatever it might be, in order to have some hot water sitting there. And this just makes sure the drink doesn't go cold before you serve it. Just like keeping your plates warm in the oven, keeping food warm if you need to. Like heat lamps in a restaurant, I guess. So the first drink I'm going to start brewing is the coffee toddy. And for the first 2, the coffee toddy and the hot buttered coffee, I'm using the same coffee brew recipe of 1 part coffee to 10 parts water. So I'm going to be grinding quite coarse. With any cafetiere style brewing device, you want to go quite coarse. The reason for this is the filter is only so fine, and if you grind too fine, all of the kind of sludgy, sandy coffee and coffee with a really bad, horrible mouthfeel will come through. So if you keep it quite coarse, you can brew for much longer, and all of the coffee grounds will stay beneath the filter rather than in your cup. So I'm going to pop this in, so 30 grams. Then, because we're doing a 1 to 10 recipe, we're going to do 300 grams or mils of water. And this is just off the boil about 96 degrees. And with a cafetiere, time is probably a slightly less important variable. You can kind of leave a cafetiere to brew for a little bit longer than you perhaps would an a percolation style brewer. Purely because the water is actually cooling down, the extraction is slowing down, and we just want to give it a little stir to make sure all of that coffee is nicely incorporated. So that's absolutely fine. Got the coffee brewing. And this coffee is actually a single origin El Salvador. It's a honey processed coffee, which means that when the coffee is picked from a tree, it actually looks like cherry. When you dry the coffee in the cherry, completely retained with the fruit inside, and then the 2 coffee beans face to face within the fruit, this is called natural processing. This gives you a really nice kind of boozy, fruity characteristic to the coffee once that's removed and dried and roasted. If you remove the first layer of fruit, the kind of tartaric, tannic notes disappear slightly, and we get all of the sticky, sugary fruit inside that on the coffee bean. So this is called pulp natural processing or honey process, which is where you control different amounts of the fruit that's left on. This is a honey processor, kind of a generic term, and it just gives it more of a kind of nutty flavour, lots of that natural fruit coming through, but none of that funky, potentially boozy characteristic you want from the natural. And then finally, if you remove all of the fruit and just have the coffee beans which sit inside the fruit face to face, which is why they've got a flat surface, this will be wash processing, and this gives you more of a kind of citrus note, a bit cleaner, less body generally speaking, and we get a slightly different characteristic according to each different processing method. And then outside this, obviously we get many more kind of experimental processes, but for now we're going to be using the honey process, and this has really good body, and we've increased that by brewing at a high strength as well. So that's steeping now, the sous vide's just warming up, and I'm going to start by preparing the coffee toddy. So we're going to be using Monin honey syrup, which is a really great product, really natural flavouring, works really well with this particular coffee. We're going to be using Glenfiddich Fire and Cane whiskey, but this can be any whiskey of your choice. I like this because it's got a gentle peatiness which complements the drink without overpowering it, but if you like a really peaty whiskey, go with that. If you don't like peat whatsoever, go with something a little bit milder. And then we've got a little bit of lemon juice, which is something I very, very rarely pair with coffee. You have to be very careful putting citrus and coffee together. They don't particularly partner well. I often use like a citric acid if I'm going to add acidity, but in this drink, it's a toddy, we need a little bit of fresh lemon in there as well. So, I built the drink, and the recipe should magically pop up on the screen in a moment. We're going to have whiskey, 25ml, and I'm going to build this straight in the tin in the sous vide. Next, we've got 10ml of our freshly squeezed lemon juice. And like I say, go very easy on this. Any more than 10ml and we're looking at a really quite sharp drink, which isn't what we're looking for. We're looking for harmony and balance. And then to balance that out, 10ml of the Monin honey syrup. So because these are going straight into the water bath, they're going to be warming up together to ensure that the drink is nice and warm. And I will just slightly preheat the cup just to take the edge off that temperature. And this is something I recommend. If you've watched my other videos, you'll see that I always have my drinks for cold drinks in the freezer. For hot drinks, I'd recommend the opposite. So preheat your cup very slightly with some just off the boil water. Be very careful not to spill it on your hands. But just like warming a plate in the oven, this is the equivalent for a hot drink. So I'm just going to get rid of that in the sink. Now, our coffee has been in here for a few minutes. So I'm going to give that a little swirl. And we want 100ml. So I'm going to pour this, again, straight into the sous vide. And by using this method of brewing, by actually steeping the coffee and the water together, we allow lots of body to be retained. And that's exactly what we want in cocktails. So, these are just warming together now in the sous vide. I'm going to give it a little stir with the bar spoon. Put that back, and then we're going to serve up. So, I like to serve this in a little teacup like this. A hot toddy traditionally would be served in a glass, which is fine. I also enjoy using a porcelain cup. I like hot drinks in porcelain, cold drinks in glass a lot of the time. So this is what I'm going with. And this particular cup is made in my hometown by a company called Doran Tan, who make beautiful porcelain cups. And the story behind this drink, which is actually similar to one I served in the World Coffee and Spirits Championship in 2018, is that a hot toddy is a really nice drink to drink on the beach. You can give it a little stir with a cinnamon stick to get some spice in there. And we actually did this a few years ago in my hometown of St Ives, drinking out of these beautiful homemade cups in the local town. And it's a really nice kind of evocative memory of the bonfire, which is why I use the peaty whiskey, and then you get really nice sweetness from the Monin honey syrup as well. So I'm going to have a sip of this. It's probably going to be quite hot. I'm going to go easily. But it's such a well-balanced drink. It's warming. I'm so happy the sun's not blistering in today. It's quite actually a cool day. And it's a really nice, comforting, warming drink. So we have the coffee toddy there, Monin honey syrup, lemon juice, whiskey, a little bit of cinnamon, and then that strong filter coffee. And it should be served with a little cinnamon stick like so. So there we have it, the coffee toddy. Cheers. Have a little bit more. they're actually more of a challenge than cold drinks, I would find, because coffee is such a familiar flavour when it's served warm. So adding or complementing this is actually a really nice challenge, and a lot of people really struggle with this. So if people are doing barista competitions or coffee and good spirits, this would be probably the hardest course. I'm going to start the second drink, which is going to be hot buttered coffee. So this, again, is two things. It's based around the classic cocktail, which is hot buttered rum, which is delicious on its own, but a real natural affinity this drink has with coffee. It has kind of the spice notes, it has a little bit of that kind of thick texture, the kind of cane sugary notes in there from the rum. Really nice complementary ingredients and flavour notes to fit with coffee. So we're going to be using the same coffee again. Obviously there's going to be rum in there. Whenever I use rum with coffee, I tend to use Pedro Jimenez. It's a little bit of a habit of mine. I find rum, raisin, coffee just such a delicious flavour profile, and the Pedro Jimenez really brings those raisiny notes because it's a sweet sherry. We're going to use a little bit of citrus from the orange, obviously a little bit of butter, and then the ingredient that pulls it all together is the Monin Winter Spice Syrup. So we're going to be using that same coffee from before, the honey process, El Salvador. We're going to pop the fresh tin in the water bath, and we're going to build it inside there again. So I'm going to add 100 mils of coffee once again, and while I do, I'll tell you the second point. It's very much a twist on one of the drinks I served in World Coffee and Good Spirits 2018, which was called A Message from El Salvador. And the idea behind that drink was to combine a hot buttered rum style drink using all ingredients from El Salvador. So I actually used El Salvadorian coffee, El Salvadorian rum, which is this one, called Ron Sirtan 12, which is made from sugarcane in the Santa Ana region of El Salvador, where they also grow phenomenal coffee. And the family who grow this are actually coffee producers as well, so a really nice synergy between the ingredients. I paired it with Pedro Jimenez, which I'm going to do now again, and also molasses from the same farm. So all of these ingredients tied together really nicely, and we're going to build from that flavour profile and recreate it here using ingredients you can actually get at home quite simply. So coffee's gone in, got 100 ml in there, and then I'm going to add 12 grams of butter, which I've got here. So about that much, if you don't have scales. And you want to get this in nice and early because you want it to be melting into that hot coffee. We need a little bit of citrus to cut through all this kind of rich, almost fattiness. So I'm going to add the zest of around about half an orange, probably 3 peels will be fine. And then make sure you reserve 1 extra. You can express that in there and give it a nice squeeze to make sure it comes out. Save 1 for garnish. So already my house is starting to smell like Christmas. So this is a really nice drink for winter, or even just the evenings as they start to slightly draw in. So I'm going to pop that there, one spare. Okay. So we've got the orange, we've got the coffee, we've got the butter. Now we'll start adding our wet ingredients. We've got 20 ml of rum. I'm using the El Salvadorian rum, but any kind of golden rum will work nicely with this. As soon as you start warming this up, it gets those real nice aromas coming off it as well. Got 20 ml of Pedro Jimenez, which actually is really easy to get hold of. Most supermarkets have some kind of Pedro Jimenez now. And this is a really good weapon to have in your arsenal if ever you're making coffee cocktails. And then finally, the bridge between all these ingredients, 10 ml Monin Winter Spice Syrup. And this is a combination of a lot of different spices. I think there's actually a little bit of chili in there as well, which really adds a little bit a nice bit of heat, I should say. Then we've got cinnamon, clove, really, really beautiful aromas coming off that as well. So that's just combining, mixing together. In the meantime, preheat my glass. Just being very careful, it doesn't break. A little pro tip if you're using really hot water. I find if you put a spoon in the glass, it shouldn't, I'm going to do it on the surface just to be sure, it shouldn't break because the spoon kind of absorbs the shock of the hot water. If a glass breaks, I'm not going to be held responsible, but that is a tip that I've learned along the way that really helps. I've never had one break on me, so hopefully that helps. And again, just going to get rid of the water, and we'll build it. So we're going to need to strain this because it's got the the citrus in there. So grab this. Obviously this is going to be quite hot now, so just be careful. and then pour it into your glass. Just have to make sure the butter's fully emulsified, which it has. And again, this drink can be held in the sous vide or your water bath for as long as you need. Because there's no dry spices in there, it won't really oversteep. I find if you leave clove in the liquid too long, it can get really overpowering and dominant. So because we're using the spice syrup, it can just keep circulating and won't deteriorate over time. And then to garnish, a little bit of orange, just to freshen it up. And there we have hot buttered coffee. And then this drink can also be made without the alcohol. So the coffee, the orange, the butter, a little bit of the winter spice, and it really does work nicely. But I find we're probably going to drink this in an evening, so the alcohol is a really nice addition to this. So good. It's sweet but not too sweet. It's really well balanced. Got the citrus on the top and the spice coming through really nicely. So there we have the hot buttered coffee. Really nice one to try. Now we're going to make the final drink, which is the boozy orange mocha. So before I start, I'm going to put my hot milk on to warm through. So in here, basically, I've got a pan. You can't quite see it, otherwise I will spill milk everywhere. Ooh, can you quite see that? Not quite, but you have to believe there is some milk in there. I'm going to put this on the heat, just with a pan. Nothing technical, nothing special. And that's just going to come up. I want to bring it not quite to boiling, but just to warm up. And in the meantime, I'm going to build the rest of the drink. So this boozy orange mocha is exactly what it says in the tin. We've got a little bit of bourbon in there. We've got chocolate powder. We've got Monin triple sec syrup, which I find is really good if you're combining with milk. It has a really nice, it emulsifies really well. It doesn't have any kernel or anything that contrasts it too much. And then we've got obviously coffee and home textured milk. So I'm going to start with the coffee. A real strong 20 grams of finely ground coffee. I'm going with an AeroPress so I can get a really nice, quick and strong brew. So I can pop this in there. And because we're trying to recreate that espresso style coffee, I've ground very fine. I'm going to pop that into my AeroPress, which is this, which is basically a big syringe type thing. I'm going to bring the water back up to the temperature, and then add my coffee. So 20 grams of coffee. I'm going to go with 100 grams of water. And what we're going to do, by combining these with each other, we're going to give it a really quick stir, or a swirl, and then I'm going to plunge into this jug, which I'm going to preload with a tablespoon of hot chocolate. So you want to use a really good quality chocolate powder for this. This is like a grated chocolate, 70% dark chocolate I believe. So as soon as the coffee goes over the top of it, it should start to mix together and melt down. So that's already in there, and I'm going to plunge straight on top of this. Our water's now ready. So the reason for this particular recipe, I want to have an end result of 1 to 3. So 3 times as much liquid in the cup as water went in. So we have a weird thing in the coffee industry where we actually judge the ratio of coffee to milk coffee to water slightly differently, whether it's filter or espresso. So because espresso, it's very hard to measure how much water is actually going into the coffee. We actually compare it to the yield, so how much we get out. So obviously it's a 1 to 5 going in because we've got 1 part coffee, which is 20 grams to 5 parts water, which is 100 grams. But because I'm going to press here, I expect to get 60 grams of liquid out. So ground coffee, 1 gram of ground coffee tends to hold on to roughly 2 grams of water. So we're going to lose about 40 grams, which is why we're going to get 60 grams in the cup. And I'm going to go really high agitation, so good swirl, and then I'm going to plunge this straight over that chocolate. And this is a really, really quick brew. Espresso tends to be brewed in about 25 to 35 seconds. This is going to be slightly longer, but not very much at all. Give that a really good press. And I want to now make sure that all the chocolate gets really well mixed into this hot coffee. So as that does its thing, I think that's actually all gone. It's looking really good. I'm gonna just check on my milk. Don't always come into life. So this is my milk. You can see it's there now, just about. And then I'm gonna pour this, very carefully of course. You've got to be really careful with that. I'm gonna pour this into a cafetiere. So, if any of you watched This Morning through lockdown, you'll have seen my good friend Sam Trevethan doing this on their programme. It's quite a funny technique. What you're going to do is use a cafetiere to froth or texture the milk. So it looks a bit weird, so I'm just going to go with it. You want to kind of hold on to the top, it's probably easier on the surface. And if you see that's 300 ml of milk, it's probably going to almost double. So I'm going to start by really rapidly mixing it together using the cafetiere, and it will really add nice texture. So already you can see that's starting to kind of whip up already. It's almost doubled in size. And while that settles, it's time for us to start building the drink. So that's looking really good, really nice texture. And you can do this with alternative milks at home. You can do it with dairy milk. Then you can make almost flat white latte cappuccino texture in your own kitchen, which is what we're going to do today. But because we've got the chocolate in there, the orange is going to be like a boozy orange mocha. So we've got our kind of chocolate coffee. Just quickly preheat the cup. We're going to add our coffee straight in there. And this is really, really strong coffee. This is almost espresso strength. So really nice. You can make this at home really easily. We're then going to add 10 ml of the Monin Triple Sec for that orange texture, orange flavour I should say. And dependent on how boozy you want to make it, and which booze you choose as well is up to you. I'm going with Buffalo Trace Bourbon for those kind of vanilla notes, but pretty much any brown spirit will do the trick. So I'm going to add 25 ml, and you can see now we've got a really nice layer of foam which has come on top of our milk. So I want to mix this back in so it's fully emulsified. Then we should potentially be able to pour a kind of latte out using milk that we've textured and heated at home. So pour this across, and kind of open it up a bit. We actually want those bubbles to come through. And we'll see now. It actually has a really good texture. For very little money, you can create coffee shop style drinks at home. I don't know if we can quite get the camera on this, but you ought to be able to get a nice kind of heart top of the drink. Ooh, there we go. So very difficult to do, but we have the boozy orange mocha. I'm going to be having some of my boozy orange mocha, and I really hope to see you again soon. So stay tuned and stay safe, and I'll see you again. Thanks very much everybody, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye. See you again.